Perfect. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming today. We have a exciting podcast style conversation that we're aiming for. But if you don't know, the group that organized today, the Technology and Architecture Practice Knowledge Community within AIA Chicago, uh, so generous to host us in our space. Just to mention some of the people who made today possible. So that's the champions of the KC and AGs, the friends of the KC sponsors, and a special thank you to the 1869 Circle Partners. Those are the organizations that support AIA Chicago at the highest level. And of course, to stay connected and learn more about what the knowledge communities and affinity groups do, we're happy to share this as well after the discussion. And we hope you attend our next event. As I'll go into here, this is episode 1 of the plugin series. So a conversation that we hope to continue with more and more guests moving forward. So what is a lot of acronyms here, the Technology and Architectural Practice Knowledge Community. So what we are, exactly that, a community that focuses in the convergence of design and innovation. So open to anyone in that field, architects, technologists, students, anyone who uses these new tools and workflows and processes that shape architecture. And so through conversations just like this, the shared ideas, experimentation, and collaboration with the locality of Chicago to move all of our design capabilities forward. And so as I mentioned, the plugin series, we have our special guest today, Laszlo Andrasi, architect and technology practice manager at Perkins&Will. And he's going to be sharing with us workflow-driven delivery. And what is the plugin series? So this is a kind of the pilot today. So all of you get to fortunately be a part of it. But the idea is a repeatable podcast style conversation where we go under the hood to all the different firms in Chicago to hear what are their wins, their pains, and their pivots. And so the concept behind that is everyone attending today can take away a practical playbook of how you can encounter these challenges and opportunities within your own workflows. And those are then repeatable lessons that apply to anyone working in this realm rather than something that's specific to just a single firm. And so I mentioned to kind of guide the conversation here, these are 3 of what we're calling cards. So the first one, and we have an example and kind of a mini case study, just some thoughts that Laszlo will share for each of these. So the win, that's a workflow that has paid off, something within the practice that clearly improved outcomes. The pain, the workflow that caused friction. So that would be something where in the technology stack, it either broke down or there was a kind of an unexpected outcome, but something that is, of course, kind of a learning opportunity. And then the last one that's probably the most exciting, that's the pivot. So that's the workflow that changed everything. So we like to think of that as kind of a best practice, but something that was challenged once the kind of constraints and world complexities arose. Either the workflow had to be modified or a new tool introduced, and that's kind of where the exciting outcomes come for a practice. With that, so we're going to start with the win that Laszlo has this year. Yeah, I'll pass it over to you.
Cool.
But yeah, I think we'll guide the conversation just roughly by these three cards. But I think it'll evolve kind of organically. So yeah, feel free to chime in as you see fit.
Cool. I guess I'll do a brief introduction. So I'm Laszlo Andrasi. I'm the digital practice manager for Perkins&Will here in Chicago. So it's a studio-specific role. I'm an architect, so I work on projects half-time. The other half, I'm working to develop digital workflows, support the office in terms of either troubleshooting or implementing new technology, or like the newest version of Revit or whatever. And then I also function in like a firm-wide capacity. I help lead the core change series for Perkins&Will, which is every quarter we have a week-long webinar series where we talk about new workflows or new technologies to go over. So I help both host those and then lead quite a few of those sessions. And then I also help, the firm-wide digital practice team looking at new software testing, investigating in workflows, and looking at different delivery methods. So I've been in Chicago now for 4 years. I live out in the suburbs in Brookfield, so take the metro every day for you guys to stay on train. But it's been awesome. I worked in Los Angeles and Dallas as a practitioner, kind of working on projects big and small, mostly healthcare and hospitality actually, which is an interesting kind of mix. And both of those have really like small projects and very large projects. So I've kind of seen a good breadth of that. And I'm happy to kind of share my experience with you guys today.
Yeah. So to kind of prompt your win here. Well, even actually even before that, I think a lot of us here can of course relate, but maybe tell us a little bit about how you kind of landed up into, I think you described it as like a hybrid role.
Yeah.
Of both, working within architecture on projects, but then being able to kind of step back and innovate a little more openly and work kind of more on the call it technical side of the different tools.
If you asked me like 5 or 6 years ago, I'm not sure if I would have planned this route for myself. It was very much like, kind of the project architect, designer kind of route. And what's interesting is it was kind of just an opportunity that I just couldn't pass up. So I was working on projects. I ended up working on a Saudi project. So international projects, especially in the Middle East, have much more stringent BIM and digital requirements. Their BIM execution plans are like 50 pages long. So I was the architect 3 on that project, being brought in to help train our high-end hospitality group, PYR, Perkins with Sean, to like train that whole team on Revit and get that project like working. So you can see I'm kind of like being selected just by like how these things are happening, but I ended up reading this digital execution plan or BIM execution plan and like starting to understand how it kind of relates to project delivery. And the digital practice manager who was in Chicago moved to Boston, and our ops manager said, well, you need to find someone in Chicago to replace you. You're going to have to do both offices. Laszlo was asking me some really good questions about that BIM execution plan. And I know I ended up, I was working on Bryant Field Stadium before that, kind of leading a lot of those kind of delivery kind of aspects as well. A lot of stories for that project as well. But Daniel Prager was like, hey, also you want to be it was called Design App Manager at the time. Want to be the Design App Manager in Chicago? What does that even mean? And ended up learning more about it and how it could have been a full-time kind of support role, but for me it was important to keep working on projects. I'm a licensed architect, and still plenty of runway to learn there. So I asked, can it be hybrid? And recently, I this year transitioned to the digital practice manager kind of official title, rather than just being an architect that was functioning in that capacity. So you'll see on LinkedIn, digital practice manager. But it was like, it totally happened by chance. And it was just the opportunity was there. I'm pretty good at this stuff, why not? And it's been just the best. So you end up going from this like bubble of your project team or like your practice area to all of a sudden I'm interacting with people, not just in digital practice, but like knowledge experts around the firm. And that really helps. I mean, Perkins&Will is huge, almost 3,000 employees, offices across the world. And we interact with all these people and start learning a ton and hearing some really valuable perspectives.
Yeah, I bet a lot of us can relate to that. Some of these titles we're throwing out, didn't exist 20 years ago.
Right.
And a lot of people, yeah, exactly like you said, kind of just end up in a role like that by default of the part that's shared, other than some technical knowledge, is just kind of a willingness to get in there and get things done and
Right.
take risks. And if the solution doesn't exist, you make it, or you find who can help. Yeah.
And I think something worth mentioning, since I know we have a few students that are in this meeting and paying attention, it's like a lot of that story hinges on you asking the questions about the BIM execution plan. And I think something I've found to be true, and it seems like it's true with your story as well, is like sometimes the best way to get to that next level is to not be afraid of asking a dumb question. Like, dumb questions are the best questions because they're the questions that are going to teach you the most, right? Like that's the biggest area that you have a gap in knowledge of. So it's the best return on your investment is asking dumb questions.
Right. Especially if you're not really sure where you want to end up. Going in as a T1 or, early designer and just trying to be a generalist and just touch every part of the project. I mean, that's all part of the AREs as well, right? Where it's like, you need to test about all these things before you can get licensed. But what's interesting is there's these other aspects of like our delivery methods now with technology that there's like more kind of like Venn diagrams forming as the practice kind of keeps moving forward. So just try to do everything you possibly can and gravitate to the ones that you're good at and you like it.
Yeah, and I have a theory that like if you're a person with initiative, you end up in the role that is most needed. And to me, in a lot of modern architecture practice, the digital practice manager is a very much needed role in almost everything. I don't think there's enough of us, and and to that extent, like, what does being a digital practice manager like mean for you as a career, like moving forward in the next future?
It's hard because it's so.
Yeah,
it is. I think, and it's changed through my time as a digital practice like person in the office. At first, it was kind of very much a support role. Like I was new to the office and working on projects, and I was like, well, I'm just going to make sure that like when someone's Enscape doesn't load, I can go in and quickly troubleshoot, or like here's where the template is, or help refine the Chicago Revit template. And the great thing about the Chicago office as well is there's kind of firm-wide leadership here. We have from like technical director, the chief design officer. There's like a whole bunch of chief technical officer. I could probably keep going, but like having access to those people from a firm-wide level, what ends up happening is like they go to their nearest digital practice person, like, hey, I had this thought, and like you end up getting to investigate something that gets implemented at a firm-wide level. So it went from, okay, so I'm a digital practice person, and I'm a support role, and there was all these kind of things happening in digital practice. I mentioned core exchanges. The person, Daniel Prager, he was leading those. If you guys know Matt Peterman, he was kind of like the original digital practice person for Perkins&Will. He started through series when COVID happened, and then he started getting way too much responsibilities with other stuff. He was like, well, someone needs to handle it, so he handed it to Prager. I was like, well, that sucks, because that's a lot of work, so I offered to help. So I hosted it for the last 4 years with him. And that's where it started opening my mind, where it's like, okay, well, first of all, you get thrown in these presentations, and like, I've never used that software. Well, you gotta get good enough to be able to present to it. And then all of a sudden, it's like opening your mind about a whole bunch of different workflows that we're dealing with. And I think that's where like the progression kind of starts happening, where you gain confidence, and all of a sudden you're able to kind of influence how your studio or even your firm but then it's like, moving forward, I think the reason I'm kind of trying to do both tracks as well is to keep as many options open as possible. So it's like, if maybe I can go the project architect designer route one day, or I could stick to digital practice, or I could do something else. But I think what's happening is you kind of see it's like there's this like clear path. It's like deviating from it at a certain point becomes harder and harder. But I mean, like you said, it seems like every mid-sized to large firm has a digital practice element in it. So it seems to be a much more recognized kind of position. I mean, think about it, like if you guys are in a digital practice situation in your studios, how much, just even the support, like I've gotten much better at that, so it's not much time, but just supporting projects so that they're functioning and being able to move the ball forward takes a considerable amount of effort that IT people don't have the knowledge base to be able to do because it's just so specific to architecture.
Yeah.
So in your day-to-day, you are more a person that waits for the groups to come to you with questions, or you were getting to the groups and understanding how they can do things better in that?
I started the support way, where I was very much just waiting people for it to ping me, and it was taking up a lot of my time. I was also working on projects at the same time too, so it was like, I was like, it's gonna be half-half, like 20-20 hours. The split was in 2020. It's like 30-30. But thank God I have Elizabeth now, and it's just way better. But it was very much reactive, and I think that was actually really good for me in the beginning because I started seeing where a lot of the problems are happening and starting to like get better at troubleshooting it and being like, maybe there's better ways to influence this. And now my biggest thing is, especially with big, large, complex projects, going up to the project team like in the very beginning, and like, hey, I'm going to do this digital strategy kickoff for you guys. Since Perkins&Will is so large, I can reach out to different offices that worked on similar projects. And I end up creating this digital practice like strategy with them. The whole mural board where we make like 10 slides and be like, hey, here's your project. Here's like everything from, if you're working at a giant hospital, you might want to get RAM upgrades on people who are going to be doing heavy production. To like, here's your model split, here's the software you should be using. And then staying in touch with those teams to help them kind of adapt as they go from phase to phase. Because that's where the biggest troubles happen. It's like went from concept to SD, and I'm like, I kind of wish you just started the new model. to
the classic debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you were doing your facade, you're modeling it like this in SD. Can we pivot into DD to a more efficient system where we're like, and it's I think that part's, I love doing that. And I think this is definitely a win where it's like the workflows that work the best are the ones that where you can like set it up and just like walk away. And then you're like, wait, I haven't heard from that person in a while. And you kind of go check in, and then you see like they're actually doing it, you know. And it was easy enough for them to be able to do.
Or when someone tells you something you didn't know about the workflow that you set up,
yes,
that's when you're like,
well, when it becomes its own living thing, and you're just kind of like, oh man, yeah. I'll give an anecdote. The most recent one. So there's this like, someone went to Mardi Gras and brought back this like crazy like fever that like ran through the office. So we're calling it the Mardi Gras fever. But when it was my turn to do that, we had a project that was transitioning, a very large hospital project, transitioning from SD to DD. And we, part of the digital strategy I was trying to do was going through these different aspects of the project. So I was looking at the enclosure very specifically, the medical planning, because they had all these user group meetings coming up, and then rendering as well as another one. But for the enclosure team, we had a recent team member for SON, Chung Moon, who was talking about, like, he was showing Rhino, and I'm like, I'm very familiar with like a Rhino unitized panel system being imported into Revit using adaptive components. Well, this project doesn't really need, it's not, you can still do it in Revit pretty efficiently, but then he was talking about making Revit families that were unitized panels. And like I was starting to get sick at that point, so I was like kind of like half listening, and I didn't quite get it. But that night I had like 105 feet, and like I had a fever dream where like I like imagined the facade like coming together, and like all all the like pieces were like coming together. And I'm like, wait, this unitized panel means you can, instead of having a curtain wall floor by floor, you can have a curtain wall for the whole west facade, north facade. And all of a sudden the grids are fixed. You don't ever have to edit those grids. They're just level by level. And you just pop in these panels and it has the, you know, the spandrel on top and the vision glass and the spandrel. And it's all parametric and schedulable. You can do a window wall ratio with the schedule automatically as you're designing. And here's the kicker. They have these custom, you're thinking like, well, this panel is going to be huge because they're going to have to make it render. It's going to have all these things. It turned out to be crazy small. So they had these vision glass panels where they modeled every layer of glass in the vision panels, like in a panel, not a wall system. So you can it actually renders. And then they did the shadow box where they have the vision glass and then they built a shadow box behind it. So these elements were all like 1.5 megabytes. And it, you know, there's 3 of them, so it's like 4.5 megabytes. And I was like, well, if we make this unitized panel, we can make it just way simpler. It renders still well. And it turned out to be less than a megabyte. It was like 700 kilobytes for this thing that used to be 4.5 megabytes. And now you don't have the grid lines. You don't have the mullions that were there. Like so now the team just has this giant wall. I'm rambling, but it was very exciting because it was like, oh, I think this could totally work. And I was like kind of brain mapping it, and I was like, wait, I sent this like that morning. I was like, I couldn't sleep last night, and I sent a 2-page essay to that team. I'm like, this is the best idea ever. And then Madeline on the project team, the team said, yeah, let's try it. Madeline went in, like built the families on her own, made them parametric, very impressed. And yeah, less than a megabyte. And it's like, the whole system is actually way better. Like, it's just, this wouldn't work for every project depending on like how complex the design is, but for this one, it worked perfect. And it's like, very exciting. And that's where I get really excited for doing digital practice. Like coming in and like just, first of all, having a conversation and understanding what they're trying to do, and then developing a workflow with them and with their existing skill sets. Because we could have easily just said, you can only do this right now. And they would have been stuck because the team didn't know that.
I think that's a good example of like something that I get asked a lot. It's like, oh, don't you miss, because you're not in architecture role anymore, you're in a design technology role.
Yeah.
Don't you miss the design, the creativity? I'm like,
Yeah.
that is creativity. Like we
Very
described, you're staying up at night, you're thinking of problem solving. That's all the things you learn in design school. That's all problems, the same type of design. You're not specifically designing maybe the building itself,
Right.
but you're designing the system of how to digitally assemble it.
Yeah.
So I think
You're
that's-
designing how you design.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's still like you're testing out, you're talking to others, getting their inputs, getting constraints, and then figuring out something that works. Several iterations, like you're taking 3 design options, because it could be a curtain wall, it could be trading web, Rhino model that gets brought in. That's all design work. And that's the exciting part, that maybe a lot of people, they think of like preeminent technology, they think it's just standards and troubleshooting, but it's not. Design workflows like that.
Right.
Having the idea about knowing the tools that you need to express them.
Yeah.
But when you're saying that from the SD to the team and then CDs, does the team changes together with the file?
It depends.
So is one team's SD and the another one's going to be CDs in the same Revit model?
And at least I don't know about everything, but typically with Perkins&Will, we like to have the same team members from beginning to end. It's rare for a project that, especially like a hospital, that it just lasts so long, and the staff comes in and out. So it kind of, it almost always happens where it's not like purposely done, but there are new team members inserting themselves throughout the process. And it becomes, especially if you're doing something, there's like a core workflow that every project should theoretically be doing. When you're starting to do new kind of innovative, kind of creative solutions, you have to document those. And you have to have some sort of onboarding strategy where it's like, I can imagine you did this crazy facade and one person was doing the grasshopper script for the whole thing. When that person is sick or leaves the firm or whatever.
They get the fever.
Yeah, they get the fever, then who's gonna pick up those pieces? And I think the best workflows are the ones that are easily able to be picked up.
Mhm.
And it depends on like our staff, probably all generally know the same thing, but there's specialties definitely in each of our offices to kind of take into consideration.
That's a, oh, go ahead.
Do you think that with all of this incoming technology that the design portion of architecture starts to lose that physicality that you might get with like sketch models and sketching stuff out on paper?
I think there will be a lot of that actually, but I think the best designs are still going to be incorporating a lot of the physical and then like whether they're sketching or models. It comes down to
Something that I just think is interesting, and it's not necessarily an answer to your question, but additional context is just, I was reading an essay a couple of years ago, but it was basically the idea was like, the reason that it seems like there's a huge jump in architectural quality for Gothic castle, or not castles, but Gothic churches, is that the cheap availability of paper meant that they could actually draw drawings on paper, and the architect could be on, or doesn't need to be on site all day, et cetera. And so there is a sort of, and I want to let Laszlo finish answering, but it's also like we need to remind ourselves that just like libraries existed before books existed, libraries will exist after books are there, and architecture existed before we were doing drawings, and it's going to exist after we finish doing drawings.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
no, I think that's a really good point. And what's interesting about like, at least as of today, my observation, if we're like considering AI and new technology, workflows, is people who are best able to communicate their design intent. So if we're talking about like creativity, and we're talking about the project, for example, and what is this project's concept of part T? The designer and architect who's going to be able to best steer that is going to be the one who's able to best communicate their design in words and visually. So like the best sketchers, you don't have to be, and I don't mean best sketchers in terms of like, you go and make a beautiful like photorealistic sketch. I mean, the one who's able to communicate their idea in a sketch and use the tool, because it's just a tool, to be able to do it. And then what I'm seeing is the people who are really talented at this aren't saving any time. They're actually just iterating way faster and having way more iterations, and their final output becomes a lot more baked and a lot more thought out. And that goes with whether you're writing, creating presentations, or designing. And ultimately, as of right now, we don't have the capability to like automate an image into a model. So like, even if you get a crazy image, it still needs to be designed and like modeled and figured out. So there's still plenty of creativity kind of happening there, but there is an opportunity to like be complacent. And I think that happens even with tools before AI, like just, visualization was this one thing where there's this professional watercolor in each studio. And then Enscape happened, and there were still very proficient graphic renderers in kind of studios, but then there became this like complacency of just, I'm gonna just take the output and live with it as a convenience thing rather than using it as a tool to kind of craft something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the way that I was taught how to think, was through Sketch and then drag that into something digital.
Yeah.
And go back and forth until that finally works out, and then push that forward.
Yeah. Well, there's a ton.
I think the flip side of this also is that the technologies that end up sticking around are the ones that appeal to the human instinct. Like if you think about like how the touch screen was developed, like everybody knows instinctively what to do with the touch screen before you even ever touch a keyboard. And if you think about AI now, like the reason AI is getting a lot of attention now, even though it's already existed for 20 years, is because now it understands normal human language. So I think, obviously we're gonna get to talk about AI and future technologies later, but like I don't think necessarily like design and technology needs to be like these two, but rather human element and the technology need to be two separate things. I think the ones that end up making the biggest difference are the ones that we can react to.
I want to circle back to something Laszlo said and kind of build off of what you were saying, which was, you said the people that are already the best at this it's not necessarily improving them, but it's helping them do more iterations. And in the end, it's a more sure product. I wonder if you could expand on that. And I guess, am I understanding this correct? And to kind of use an example that maybe Thomas might, what you were alluding to is like, we could find a company that has a bad logo and we could feed it into AI and say, generate a better logo. But if you take the Coca-Cola logo and you tell AI to make a better logo, I imagine you would have a hard time taking an output that the majority of people would say, this is a better new Coca-Cola logo than the old one, because we are good at it and we do have people that are good at this. It's just we're raising, are you kind of saying like it's the lower level is raising, but the top is staying mostly at the same, or these are two separate thoughts? Or I guess I'm just, if you could maybe expand on that.
I think there's like two instances of when you're using AI. There's like AI when it's like, I just need to get something done super quick. And then there's that probably saves time, but it's also scary because you're just kind of running through these things. The ones I was talking about is the people who I've seen things that like genuinely impressed me when they've used AI. You ask them how long it took them to do that, and it's virtually the same amount of time as if they were going to do it the old way.
It's not about speed.
Right? It's not about speed. It's about using the tool to help you design.
Yeah.
And a good thing a thing architects tend to do is use up every second of that deadline to get something.
Right.
And maybe it's arguable if their output is better or not than what if they've done it solo, because we're talking about extremely talented experts. But I think there is definitely value happening there. And it lets you kind of iterate with skills that you might be a very good designer and good at like final renderings, for example, but like getting a quick sketch or watercolor, you're not a great watercolorist yet, and I want to start the Studio Ghibli stuff, which I've actually like signed that in. I really want to try this style, I have this great idea, but you don't have the technical ability to do that yet.
Yeah.
If you're patient and iterating like crazy, I guarantee you will probably get there using these kind of new tools.
Yeah, no, and I think the way that you expanded on that makes me, I'm like, okay, I was looking at the problem or what you had said, I was looking at it from the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And now I get what you're saying. And yeah, like it's true. Like just today I kind of wrote and like, there's this book about parametric design that I've always read and I don't understand all the math. And I'm just like, help me create like a companion for the math so that I can understand this book, because I know there's good info in there.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's to mention the Coca-Cola logo, because we know what a good logo is and we know what a good design is, right? But how to make the AI, control the AI for them to stop hallucinating and do what I want in the time that I have. That's the trouble, I think, with AI now. But like, we saw how we changed the way we do our workflows when we passed from cat to rabbit, right? The design phase and the CG phase. The CG phase a lot faster in rabbit. We spend more time on the design, and now with the AI helping with the design, that's about to change, and the balance is about to change. And then you start people that are the best designers, but they are not the ones that are going from the beginning to end, as we think to specialize in the things that we do more and more. That's what I'm seeing right now, that those specialists that are applying AI, they'll be more involved in ST, because that's not translating so well to Reddit. It's not so easy to export at the moment. There are tools, we're getting there, right?
Yeah, that's something where I think it's nice I ended up putting with it. It's like, I think the mentality should be that you go through each phase of the project, and designers, there's a ton of value in having a design thread from beginning to end on a project. What tends to happen though is, like, if you do tons of early phase stuff, you're missing all this where all the meat of the kind of design is in the technical. So if I know, that's where I was kind of telling our students, being as general as possible for like kind of as long as you can, will give you a much stronger base to kind of build off from. But yeah, I mean, that's where I was saying there's the danger of like being complicit with these tools. And at the end of the day, for something we're using like Banana or, Comfy UI or anything like that, it's just generating an image, and someone's gonna need to figure out how that works technically. And it gives me a lot less heartburn, it makes me a lot more excited when it's you're controlling your party, your concept throughout the process and not letting it drive you so much, because then you could you hopefully have the technical expertise and the experience to be able to guide it to something that's feasible. Or yeah.
It's an interesting point of view, exactly the opposite of mine, and open my mind.
Yeah.
Because like I said, doing those things are easy, you can do it.
Yeah.
So if you are general, you don't need to spend time in the design phase creating a spatial structure of family to be able to show that to the client, to just say, okay, this will be a spatial structure, and then render the structure, render oh, this is a structure.
Yeah.
So I don't need to waste so much in that.
Right. But then where did that start? Did you just type something in and just be like, oh, that was nice? Or do you go in and like you had an idea and you sketched it and then you put it in? Or you saw it, you typed in something and you're like, and you printed it out and you sketched over that, or you kept talking to the prompt, and I think that's where like being okay that it's gonna maybe not save you time, but maybe still get you there, I think is really pretty interesting.
Save time, because I spent like 2 weeks creating a family to be able to do something that the client said, oh, we're not doing the structure anymore.
Well, that's a different thing too. I'm not going this one, I know. We got the one question. But
Not even.
oh man, okay.
It's now a 3-part series. Each one is the.
I can get going. No, this is really good.
It took second ground rules.
Yeah, okay. We'll go to the
No,
next.
finish your thought.
Okay, finish the
Like, I
thought.
think it's.
We talked about this in the beginning. It was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, I'll be quick, and that is, people get way into the weeds too quick early in projects, where they're like, it needs to be like you were saying, I need to build this crazy family to get it to work, when you could have sketched that, even like sketch modeling, that's another kind of modeling, right? It's like, where it's just like, I just need to kind of rough it in and get the point across, but there's this like tendency to over deliver throughout the phases that I think really hurts us, where it's like, we need to have things fully figured out in concept. I'm like, oh man, like, why are we in Lumion, and it's like, but yeah, trying not to over deliver is a challenge.
Well, I think that kind of relates to it as well, like we were talking about AI.
Continue.
I don't know if we got into AI kind of early in the conversation,
I
but
love that.
a lot of the design phase AI, like that's what's appealing to look at, that's what gets talked about the most. But I would say that that's not where overall an architecture has the most impact, because if we look at the documentation work, that's a lot of repetitive work, and yeah, and it's also the bread and butter of AI, right? I mean, that it can iterate through these things effortlessly, and is not as much concern about losing creativity and doing like that's kind of what it can do efficiently, fast, and free up other type of more creative work that everyone's more specialized in.
Sorry, if we continue this thought, I wanted to add something on something interesting that was actually brought up in this conversation, which has to do with this experience of like, I can't really make it do what I want it to do right now, but I see some people doing it, right? Like, how is that possible? And then the speed, right? The reason why I kind of shouted out is like, well, it's not really about speed, even though it seems like it's about speed in so many ways. It's because of the following that comes to mind. So every kind of expert in a certain field, say it's like writing, right? I've been listening to these writers talk about AI. Can tell the nuance between like the AI generated writing and can get into the weeds and get it to like write or like really help with the writing in a way in which, for me, having delegating some writing that I don't generally care about, the aesthetics of or whatever, but mainly just to get it over with, is just so different.
Yeah.
And I feel like it explains that kind of concept between like what every kind of expert in their field is doing with the tool, right? So like for some things, like writing for me, it's so easy. It's just like, yeah, it's fast. Like I don't have to think about that. It's like here it is. Like, and again, talking about just like not important writing, right? And then like when you get into the weeds of like generating, so we've been doing like these floor plans in Nano Banana. Oh my God, it's like crazy, like how far you can go with this. And it's just like you keep iterating and iterating, and you're talking to this thing, and it's just like you have no idea how many floor plans I can get you. I mean, it's just insane.
He created something that looks nice. I love it, but it's
Yeah.
not what I did. So it was,
Yeah.
it's the computer doing now.
Well,
Then that's
But just to like kind of get to the bottom of it, like I think what I'm saying is that unless you spend the time and unless you see it, like what is really keen here is the kind of sense you have of like what is good, right? So like for somebody who doesn't do floor plans every day, it would be so great, like, oh yeah, I could do this, and the first iteration is great, like here it is. You know what I mean? I did a floor plan for this, like my mom or whatever, like somebody who doesn't do architecture, right? But like for somebody who's in it like day in and day out, and this is just one example, like obviously renderings, whatever, like you have a more keen eye of like what it is you want. And like the only way to get it would be to spend your time to learn your tool. And these tools are crazy because they're wild. Some are, you know what I mean? Nonetheless, like every tool comes with its own difficulties and easiness. But like nonetheless, if you don't spend the time in it, I feel like you're just, not there, right? Like, so anyway, rambles.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, it's exactly on topic. We're talking about AI as maybe, in the pessimistic opinion as like the great kind of equalizer, but it's also that's the examples we're sharing, like the great upskiller.
Mhm.
And I know a topic I heard a lot recently is like knowledge management. And, firms are actually hiring people with that title. But I was hoping, Laszlo, you could share with us that Perkins&Will has a pretty interesting tool about knowledge management, an entire platform, which I think you mentioned AI is in development of being integrated, but even without that, leveraging the subject matter experts that you mentioned at the beginning of to upskill the entire staff.
That was an incredible segue.
I had half an hour to prepare.
AI could have done it.
Okay. I think this is why I'm digital practice too. But the thing that's more interesting to me than AI, it's all very cool, it's shining, but the thing underneath it is this like data. And it's like our firms have so much information everywhere. We have our network drives, we have someone's download folder, we have something in SharePoint or Bin 360, and hard copies everywhere, and it's kind of a mess and a prerequisite to be able to do like benchmarking. Like, hey, what size should this OR be, or what size is my recent schools, or across all my firm, who's over here, who's worked on this, is having this like common data platform. And being able to, first of all, just query things, maybe not even from an AI standpoint, you're just trying to query things, it needs to be in one place. But once you have everything in one place, you're able to start doing something pretty magical, hopefully, which is introducing agents and AI into there to be able to help guide new people through your firm's process. And what Perkins&Will ended up doing, and I helped facilitate the kind of the implementation of in Chicago, was Perkins&Will's Hub app. So it's an application built on a database that is where all of our personnel, all of our project information, all of our internal kind of events, our design, everything, our living, our technical, legal, everything is all on this one big platform. Project managers end up doing all of their project managing, so like staffing, creating the budget in the project app. The project app is tied to the people app and to the pipeline app for new projects coming in. And all of that is tied to the studio staffing app and to your own particular schedule. And there's like dashboards on dashboards and dashboards. But what I see, this is the win for the slide, where this was, I mean, very intimidating. So if you think of a project manager or principal in an architecture firm, they have been doing this for like 20, 30 years, typically. Like, they are senior members of the staff, and it's really difficult to be able to tell them, no more Dell Tech, no more MS Project. You're going to be doing your project managing in this brand new thing we made for you. I'm happy I wasn't the guy who made it, but no, talk to him. But they did a great job. That the development team, who was led by actually Matt here, and who's now the director of enterprise apps, they created this app. It took a ton of feedback. It took the punches for us. And now, since I started digital practice to now, 3-4 years later, every project is in the hub, is in project app, and it's pretty incredible. About, yeah, it's kind of weird when you onboard a new person and like, oh yeah, we have an app for that, and then there's kind of like a million different apps too, which is I think a pretty big problem. Actually, it's an interesting challenge. But this hub app.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, yeah. But it's this common data platform, and we've extrapolated that into a tool we have called AIA Sync, which lets us harvest information from our Rhino and Revit models to a database that lets us benchmark projects, or like look at the areas in the model, the Revit model, and compare them to the Excel spreadsheet and Power BI. And all of a sudden, first of all, it's like a QA tool for our models. There's tools out there that let you do similar things, like Speckle and some other ones. If you guys are interested, happy to talk to you about that. But being able to validate the project's program for the project team is already incredibly valuable. Understanding where we are from a gross area standpoint and a net area standpoint, I've seen like so many projects get really burned by being kind of, hey, where we are at the gross area, and you end up, oh, let me double check, you're way over. And that gets us in hot water, and ending up having to do a lot of redesign out of our pocket. But anyway, we have this AIA Sync, which helps us QA. It helps us benchmark future projects because we have all of our model information. And all of a sudden, it starts opening up this new kind of advisory service, this new digital service for clients, where it's like, hey, we can maintain your portfolio of projects in a dashboard for you guys to be able to use and benchmark your own projects. And now all of a sudden, this like wave of project work where it's like, you win a project and you win a ton of fee, and then like, imagine this is the client's timeline. You win a bunch of fee from the client, and then you don't hear from them again until the next proposal. And you have this kind of big peaks and valleys. When you have advisory services where you're making a dashboard, for example, all of a sudden those peaks level out, and you're getting a little bit of fee, and you're maintaining that relationship with clients, which is like, if you're getting FaceTime with clients, that's the best marketing you can do. So these new advisory services are becoming much more common at Perkins&Will. Dashboards is just one of them. Ends up being these really cool opportunities to, first of all, get more money for the office, which is always great, and then provide more value to the client and be able to speak to them as they're kind of like, they're my professional architect. So these whole things kind of like dovetail together. You kind of like Russian doll, need to like stack them up until you're able to get to that final outcome. But that data kind of, when AI came out, it was like, well, we can't really train that on any of our data for the knowledge experts because that's happening in like someone's email or like someone's OneNote.
It's not, it's siloed, or
it's siloed.
It's not, structured to the point where it's valuable.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how do you bring that together? That becomes one of the hardest tasks to be able to do, because you have to implement a structure, bring as much information that you're kind of currently working with into it, and then make it as seamless as possible for people to be able to adopt it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, is like, you need to implement some sort of data standardization, right? And when you're talking about your projects, I assume you're talking about all your projects in the history of Perkins&Will, not just the newer project.
Yeah,
Right?
well, that's a different one. We try to, the old projects across Perkins&Will is probably way too hard. We focus on more of the recent ones, or like the very near recent that have completed. So like the project app only has projects from like when we were transitioning through that till now.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of, I think a lot of with these implementations, retroactive implementation is really hard and like kind of damaging too. Like it's hard to find value in that versus just like drawing a line in the sand and just being like, okay, that was great what we were doing till now. We are making this pivot. Yeah.
What you said about that particular tool and kind of how you had to tell these project managers that you're using a different one for all these years, and then someone else had to kind of do it so you guys can read the success. It also kind of pivoted to the pain that's on the screen, this section. How about cases where you were on that and what those guys had to do before, where you have a tool that you're really excited about, it works really well, but people are used to doing things in a certain way. Now you have to convince them that it's worthwhile to go through a learning curve, to learn this new tool, it's gonna pay off later. How, maybe talk about some of the challenges and the pain points of that, and maybe what your go-to is.
This is, I love this question because I think the biggest pain you probably experience when you're first starting out in this kind of digital practice realm goes directly into that. You end up going in as someone who ends up, being very good at particular things, and you want to kind of share the expertise and kind of bring every project along. And I think the way it was a great kind of learning opportunity for me is understanding not everybody has the same skill sets I do. And even then, like that's even expanding above that, like the same kind of interest to be able to dive into this particular kind of workflow. So then it's, the pain was really kind of learning that, understanding that if I'm gonna propose something to the project team, I need to come to them at the level they're already at and see where the opportunities for them to improve are from there, rather than trying to bring something totally new. One thing that was, I was working on like this automated analysis using Speckle. The other pain is like overcommitting to one kind of particular tool or software that's not part of the core tool set. So like I was diagramming out with my digital practice teammates, like, okay, if we're gonna have all of our core tools at Perkins&Will, what is the minimum number of tools I could put on that list that project can be delivered successfully? And like, you can always add projects, but what's the minimum list where you can't really take anything else away? And we said Perkins&Will's, Revit for production for most buildings, right? And then it's probably going to be Enscape for visualization, even though everybody on digital practice is like, but why? We'd love to like swap that one out in particular, just because if you had to troubleshoot Enscape issues like I have, you would not argue. And then there's like, another 8, there's like Miro for pinup, and then it's kind of like SharePoint and Microsoft for collaboration, and Bluebeam Review for PDF editing and QA. And then another kind of issue was at the bottom was all the places we still had data. So like there's Forma/ACC, right? Which, okay, and then there's BIM 360 still, and then there's SharePoint, and we have our network drives, and then we have our library kind of Avail. There's still probably way too many of these here at the bottom. But I guess what I'm getting at is there's like these core tools that we've kind of identified as, these are things that like a designer kind of one all the way through to like a project architect are going to be using on a project on a day-to-day level. So understanding these are where the biggest opportunities for impact and workflows are, or like it's generally safe to assume these are going to be the ones that people are gonna be most familiar with and like most acceptable of adopting. The thing I was doing before that was like, okay, I want to use tons of Rhino XI and Speckle to develop these like automated workflows. And I was doing some really cool things with dashboards and like automating like view corridors and like daylight studies. It was with Mario, we were just going crazy. And what ended up happening was version 1 of Speckle turned into version 2 and all of our flows broke. And I was like, well, that sucked. And then, oh, okay, we rebuilt them. And then version 3 came out and it broke all over again, but like worse. And now we're just kind of like, and it's just like, you know, oh man, it got burned like a little bit. And we're still trying. There's still, I think, opportunities with Speckle, but it's definitely lost it. I lost the kind of like, the glitter in my eyes or something, you know, like the
visual
eyes. Yeah. I was so innocent.
It's the inverse feeling. It's like we discussed earlier, how good it feels when you give someone a workflow and then they use it in a way that doesn't. And then this is like when you build this really amazing workflow on a third-party app, and then the third-party app is like, we're going to pivot towards a different building sector, and now you can't do that thing anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that gets into standardization versus flexibility, and it's really hard because there's like there are these standardized tools that we're using. But like people are still using things differently, and it becomes a pretty real challenge. And I think a lot of those first couple of years were like me approaching like projects from maybe my own agenda. Like I want more analysis on projects, more this or that, where I saw value kind of happening, rather than coming to a team and just being like, so what are you guys trying to do? And then once you understand what they're trying to do, and then, okay, well, what are you trying to do it in? And you get this like baseline context. I mean, these guys are professionals too. They're not digital practice team members, but they're using these software all day, every day. Like they have really cool insights. And then being able to change that into something that they can own becomes really interesting, because it's like, it's really hard to get people interested in something that is like, first of all, brand new process, and they see as like, well, now I have to learn this thing, it's gonna be extra work, you know?
Number one.
Yeah, it's also difficult, like when you talk about the core that has the most impact. So that's also the ones that people stick to the most, like grasp onto the most, because they're like, we use this every day, we know it so well.
Right.
That's the one we really don't want to learn and stop doing.
Yeah.
And think outside the box. We know how to use it well. It gets the job done. It produces deliverables. Why do we have to learn something else?
A big thing is like you're looking at the carpet on concept. We're like, you grab this concept, and the worst feeling for me is someone the team decides to adjust their design intent because of their software capabilities. Like I go through CDs and I'm like, oh, you guys ended up here because you just couldn't figure out this curtain wall on Reddit. And I'm like, if I knew about this in SD, like we could have trained up the team or brought in a new team member to like save that design intent throughout. And that sucks. And that really hurt. And it's hard to get that like not to happen, honestly. So just trying to engage with project teams really.
I would say those are the two things. Hearing the design thing because you didn't know how to do it digitally.
Yeah.
Because and the other one is hearing a lot of manual clicks. Like that, just something went wrong here.
We click and you're like looking at their process and it like documents like 20 steps. And like, no. And like you're okay with doing this all day. Room data sheets are a great example. Yeah. Where it's like, okay, I need to have a plan, an RCP, elevations, and an axon for these user group meetings for this room. I'm like, there's literally, you make a diamond script, there's a CTC plugin tool for that. Like, so I taught mental planners that for this project, this hospital project, and they were like, this changed our life. Like this saves us. Right. And it's like, I feel okay. I'm like, it's CTC, they're probably not going anywhere, but it's opening their brain up to like, there's ways to do this thing that will save you tons of time. But they wouldn't have known if you didn't. Kind of like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about like, it sucks when somebody designs to the limitation of the software. It's like, and I'm not going to say that I have firsthand experience making this argument, but But I think it's worth reminding some people, it's like, you can tell some of the buildings in the nineties were designed to the limitations of CAD. And it doesn't look good 30 years later. And you don't want people saying that about your building in 30 years,
We'll
so.
see it like SketchUp.
Yep.
Or Revit, especially Revit, yeah.
And so that's like, just, I think you really want to tell people like, well, your building's gonna exist longer than that limitation does, so maybe put the extra effort in.
I always make the opposite argument. If people can build stuff like Sagrada Familia without any computers,
Yeah,
then, you know, why
but
can't
we're
we
both
do
saying,
it?
don't let the
Less
computer's
complicated.
limitations stop you, yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's why interoperability is so important,
Yeah.
because there's a tool for just about everything. But then sometimes, people get siloed, oh, this tool doesn't produce drawings, well, it doesn't have to.
Right.
If you have someone on the team that knows how to connect them and make that seamless transition, which in almost all cases is possible nowadays.
Right.
It's just a matter of having the knowledge to do it.
Right, yeah. I guess that's where it's like the pivot or the way that Speckle kind of changed their mindset was going from this, I like to call it like the postman or the mailman, where it's like, I want it here, here, and here, and I want it back, and you're able to just very fluidly go between software. Their mentality now is more like one directional, where it's like, I'm doing this operation in Revit, and then I need to do this operation in Rhino, and I'm okay with it living in Rhino. And then like whatever I output, I could bring it into Revit to reference, but the expectation is I'm gonna be editing in Revit, which is, I think, a crazy hard sell actually for project teams. But it's something where I'm like, well, I think that's really interesting is ideally I wanna be in the software that's the best tool to deliver this particular workflow. And what's the easiest way to get it there? And then it becomes challenging, but then, yeah, I think I saw someone design that project in Revit, actually. They modeled it with edited place massing. Yeah.
Also, with Sagrada Familia, to be fair, Sagrada Familia is an interesting project because it touches on a couple things. It stopped progress because the architect had siloed all the information and then died.
Yeah.
Then they found the models that he built, and it was because of like modern technology, they were able to backwards engineer from the model, right? Like, so it's an interesting, touched on a lot of stuff we talked about today.
Yeah.
I also don't know which is worse. Is it basically doing it however way you know to do it, right? Even if it like takes forever, or like you're doing like, your 2D lines in Revit, say, like we had some of that, or it's like, or is it basically like changing the design or something because you consider that limitation, therefore not possible. And that's like eliminating obviously the most plausible option here, which is talk to your, specialists like yourself, right?
Right.
So for some reason, people
I think there's a way more obvious.
trouble asking a question.
Well, yeah, I think
Is that kind of what you find the biggest culprit there, or?
Yeah, so I think the first one we're talking about line and Revit. What's interesting, this is definitely changing as like models of deliverable becomes more kind of implemented, but as of today, our drawings are still PDFs that we end up printing.
Sure.
So like the BIM, it's so funny to me. I had this presentation where I'm all like the early architects like this caveman charcoal painting or whatever, and then we eventually got to hand drawing and then to CAD and to Revit, and like the deliverable is always this like flat drawing, right?
Yeah.
Like the Revit deliverable is this axon with these elevations, like even our door schedules. Like, why is that on the sheet? That should just be an Excel thing, it's like, what are we doing this? So it's there's like at right now, it's like it's still a 2D deliverable, and if the building is able to get built like the way that you were intending it to get built, like it's like okay, like we could have really helped you out, but like you at least got the project done. The thing that really sucks is like you have this design intent and you have this like vision for the project that like the client is super on board for, and you come up to this like dumb thing in Revit that could have been figured out. And that's where it's like, whether it's sometimes it's just maybe you don't have the skill set on the staff. The thing that, because Will does that, I think probably people are starting to do more and more, is getting design assist relationships with manufacturers. Like just go to the people who are gonna be doing this curtain wall and be like, hey, can you help us figure this out? And then they'll come and help. We did that with Zaner for metal panels. And even like developed like grasshopper scripts to be able to quickly look at a facade mass and see what optimizations we can do to the panels without hurting the design. So it's like, yeah, asking for help, I think, is something we're hoping people get better and better at, and even beyond this thing from the studio.
But it's not an easy thing, especially if you don't really know, right? So that was kind of the next question. Do you do a lot of training? Do you do a lot of show and tell type things? Like, right, like, or so people can know what to ask, because oftentimes it's just, how do you know?
Tons of training all the time. And the approach we have is just like shotgun approach, where we try to get everything on the boards all the time, just inundate our staff so that they're not going to remember it. But if they remember that they heard something, it becomes really useful. So I mentioned the chord exchanges. So we have like a whole week, so like 12 sessions of chord exchanges. We're going from everything from like, here's how to make a digital execution plan to like the newest thing in Revit, or how to do keynoting in Revit, or visualizations, tons of AI stuff, obviously. And then doing that 4 times a year on a firm-wide level has been great. Like, we get like thousands of views throughout the year on that. And then I think what gets more interesting is like, okay, what do you do beyond that at a studio level? And that's where it's like, I found it difficult to like try to implement training to like a whole group of like a certain level of people that really only like 5 of them are kind of interested in hearing. So it's like finding the people who are interested in improving their kind of workflow, and finding like a champion to like, oh, you came to me with this issue, are you interested in this? Kind of give them a carrot. And when they gravitate to that, once they've done it on a project, once they've done it, not you, then all of a sudden other people are like, wait, we saw, David use this, or Ellie was doing this. And then you're like, well, yeah, happy to show you how to do that. And then it starts like grassrooting its way around the studio.
To what extent do you think that the curriculums need to change to keep pace with what's changing?
Over schools.
Good question.
I have 2 students here, actually. Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of college students. It's awesome. So Triton. And the technical skills that we're teaching at this place are amazing. Like last semester, I taught CAD and Rhino, AutoCAD and Rhino. And what's interesting about it is like, I know probably none of our firms are using CAD on the big circuit. Sorry, guys. But there's a point to it. And I think, so Francis, our director, there's still a ton of really small firms still using CAD. And those are I interned at like 3 of those in school and out of school. And you learn a ton having to do everything there. But these things are building off of each other. And then learning, I think we can improve our technical ability, because at the bottom line, we're at the job fair, they're gonna say, hey, do you know Revit? And it would be, I think, good to be able to say that, yeah, I've used Revit at school, and then I think a lot of schools also require internship hours. So they're kind of pawning the like, well, you're gonna have to learn the real thing over here, but I think that is awesome, because like, might as well learn the real thing at a real place. So knowing those technical skills, I think, is really important, and probably should like have a second look at that from like the more 4 to 5 year programs. But I still love the like go hand draw, and build physical models. Like that's all stuff that's really valuable too.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because IIT, the way that their curriculum is set up, for me, first year it was all hand drawing. You had to draft everything by hand. And then even in the second semester, my professor challenged me to don't touch any rulers, draw all of your final boards, sketching.
Yeah.
But the way that they integrate software is through separate classes other than studio.
Yeah.
And then second year you get thrown into it, because you have 2 semesters to learn I think it was Rhino, and then
Was it like a true Rhino class, or is it like there's a topic using Rhino to do?
it was, let's see. So it was doing these different tasks using Rhino. And then the more classes you took in Rhino, the more it became about how do you do parametric design for Rhino?
Yeah.
How do you use all these different plugins in Rhino? And just after you learn the bare bones of the software, figuring out and failing with all of these different tasks, just to strengthen your idea of what
Right.
it can do. And that's the same way that IoT approaches softwares like Revit, where it's you first learn the bare bones, and then you, through your projects, push it to the limits, and then problem solve and fix it in a more controlled setting.
Yeah.
Which I find
I love that. I'm gonna call Poly Pomona. So at Polytechnic, I think very much, we ended up doing a lot more technical. Now, I think a decent amount where you have same kind of format, where you have prime classes and then you spread it out. So I do think that there's a ton of benefit in having those kind of skills available. And I think it could be done in a way that doesn't jeopardize that like design kind of ethos that is being embodied.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, like, is there a point where when the students are working with Revit and Speckle, for example, in Studio, is that pulling, detracting, for example, other goals of the curriculum?
There's,
I would say it doesn't have to.
I don't think it does. Yeah, I don't think drawing the wall section hurts either. You know?
I think one of the things that's super, one of the things that's super interesting is like, because I think, you know, the software question is like, how should schools handle software? That question's existed for a long time, but at the same time, and it's a good question that should be talked about. And I feel like when I was in school, I had a different opinion than I have now, which is almost like maybe it should be something like a Montessori thing where you would have digital practice type professors that can help guide you in your own personal journey. Because here's the thing, let's not even talk about software. The number of meetings I've been in where we talk about the direction in which we're going to number our drawings for the project and the numbering system and the grid system, we're going to put the sheet and how the sheets work, right? It's different on every project, no matter how many standards are set in an office. Because here's the thing, so many people at the higher level that are running this and making those decisions, they don't know what the standards are. And the standards in their opinion are whatever their opinions are. And so it's the same thing for software and how you use software. Like as much as it's always changing, it's always an opinion, but there is like a conversation that always needs to happen. There's always, no one uses the number blue, right, to number a drawing. That's too far off the norm, but you'll find people using 1 and 1A or 1 and 1B or something like that, but you never get too far off the norm. And so you probably don't want to tie yourself down to like a single set system, but I don't know. It's just like, it's just so weird that like something that seems like so simple and there's a finite number of options and we still can't figure this out as an industry.
And not to bring AI again, but I heard this in a like movie or several things. There's like a line that says school is about interpersonal relationships anyway. Like it's not about you know technical. You're not going to know what your firm exactly does, how it does it. Like I mean, there's just like also a ton of YouTube. Like I mean, you know what I mean. Like when you want to know something and when you're interested in a tool, I feel like you're not going to wait for somebody to teach you it. Like there's just like you're going to have an interest in using the tool, and so I wouldn't rely on the schools,
Yeah, the education fosters the environment that kind of promotes that learning, whatever it is. But
correct. Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, it's an architecture school. They already expect so much of your time for this stuff, they expect you to also go into YouTube and also do this and don't allocate like actual time for it. It's overwhelming. And I think that, there's probably courses supplementary
Mhm.
But we don't know how the studio culture kind of takes precedence and makes it seem like that's the only important class.
Mhm.
I think maybe instead of requiring 6 physical models during 3 days, maybe a seminar and a software or like a wall section from it's 2 models and two of those wouldn't hurt.
One thing that is like common, so like, it's rare, I think, for people to be like at one firm their whole career. So you end up having to be, I think, really good at adopting different standards. From like so I think that's where it's having a good base level of skills is good. And also not being flexible in terms of, or especially early on, and as you go to a firm, these are their standards, and like sometimes for bigger firm, it's harder to kind of enforce those, but for depending on where you end up, there's going to be the way they do things, and it might even just be specific to that project, but being adaptable to that, I think, is really, really important. And like to segue back to digital practice, it makes it really, that's part of the challenge for introducing new workflows, is because like, yeah, you kind of understand generally how most projects are being done, but you really don't know until you see the project team kind of in action and understand how they're kind of working to be able to understand, is what you're doing going to be super helpful. If they're using text notes to tag like filled regions in a detail, then you're like, well, you can't use Keynote Manager, or you can't use Keynotes for that, and you're kind of using like Revit like CAD, I guess, like we were saying. And at the end of the day, they end up having a drawing set that should be pretty good. It just took there's like lost kind of opportunity, I guess, there. But yeah, you kind of have to take these on as you go, and it's like at this point, it is pretty obvious which software is probably good to have in your tool set coming out this year. So whether or not your specific curriculum is facilitating that, like, it's probably a good idea to go on like
Did I finally get us to the pivot? I think we got there naturally.
I think we did.
But no, Laszlo, you mentioned that you and your team had prepared that kind of core list of software, 8 to 10 or so that the architect uses every day. So what happened if those tools just disappeared?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I learned the majority of them in school.
Right.
I was still training to be an architect. So the if one day to the next, a whole new suite of tools got introduced at Perkins&Will and across the industry, how could from the workflow perspective, how could you take everything that you had been doing and kind of get back to business as normal as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I know this is a super, so let's take it as like, yeah, there's this core list of software, and I think at this moment that they're kind of in there, but any one of them can get like popped down and popped back in, and it's not looking at these tools aren't how you're doing your job, or these tools aren't your job. You're doing something in particular. If you're doing documentation, you're using Revit to facilitate documentation for your project. But understanding how you are documenting at a fundamental level helps it be a lot more flexible when like there's a disruptor that happens and it comes in. Like if AI plugs in here and you have to use it, having a good understanding of what you're trying to do is really important. So just continuing on the documentation kind of idea in terms of understanding, how assemblies work. So it's like you're documenting from an overall plan, and then you're going to elevations, and then you're going to building sections, and then wall sections. And those wall sections are going to be all about your different assemblies and the intersection between those assemblies. And now, even if Revit goes away, like you're understanding, okay, here's the workflow to get to these end results, which are going to be my details, in my assembly sheets. If Revit gets pulled out, which is like probably that's like the one hardest to get off of that list at the moment, but or visualization. I'm trying to do this rendering, and it's like, well, I'm starting with my model, and then I'm extracting it into either it's real-time rendering the landscape, well, you're gonna start with the white box model, and you're gonna have to apply materials. And with landscape, you're applying it all in whatever design platform you're using, Rhino or Revit or SketchUp. There's that kind of workflow where you're building the materials and your assets. That kind of changes if you export that model into Twinmotion or T5 or Lumion. Now it's a standalone Revit rendering model, but you're still applying materials. You're still generating views. And if you have a really good eye for composition, so if you get good at just napkin sketches and like quickly understanding how you want your view to look, then you can start being better at rendering just at a general level. And if you look a little bit in like lighting and stuff and understand how, like understanding the process from an overarching standpoint, if one of these softwares get kicked out, you're able to be a lot more flexible. And I think that's where, that's like an individual basis. If you switched firms and had that kind of a mentality going in, you might go from a firm that uses Rhino all the time to a firm that only has SketchUp. And then it's like, well, that sucked, but sorry, that was not the right call. But you could start applying those like broader concepts into that workflow. And there's going to be like a learning curve, but you'll get there. And I think it's our job as people who are leading our offices from a digital standpoint to look at these from a broader perspective. Like there's a way I would approach that facade I was talking about with the fever dream, where it's like I would have just done that all in Rhino. And it would have been sick. There would have been a crazy script that I clicked the button and it all updated, and it would have been like, I would have been crying, you know? The problem is that's not where the team was at. They were at the Revit kind of level. And there was this idea with the unitized panels that was solid. Like it's a good idea. And it's not really a way that we do it. And kind of investigating that and applying it to that project ends up becoming, first of all, if there's value, the project team will find out very quickly, because if it's not working, they will abandon it at like the drop of a hat and go back to what they were doing before. But if there is value in it, and you kind of test it out on that project, then you can start saying, well, okay, this unitized panel idea was really good. And that's kind of how they would build it. Yeah, they would build these panels and just plug them in. So maybe we extrapolate this logic for future projects and start having everybody think of when they're building their curtain walls in this kind of way. Maybe as they're transitioning from like SD to DB or something, but you can start applying these workflows more broadly. And it doesn't really matter if they're going to use Rhino or Revit, because you can figure out a solution to be able to do that.
What about new tools? What does R&D look like for all this other stuff you gotta sift through when it comes to development and technology, especially AI related?
The new tools are the toughest ones, because they're the ones we get most excited about. Like the people in this room who are here for technology, and we see a tool and we're like, oh, new shiny. And then like, we want to like use it on a project, you know? And the thing that, if we take a half step back, we're like, okay, what is this tool trying to do? Do I have something that's kind of already doing this? Is it doing a lot better? Like where is the value in replacing an existing tool and with a better process? Or, and I'm finding this a lot with tools, it's just kind of something that someone has a pet project on, and it doesn't really belong anywhere. Like it doesn't fit cleanly in our contract, in our deliverables. And it's like, there's something you really want to do. It's kind of like the pain stuff I was talking about before, where it's like, I want to automate analysis. And I'm like, well, you know, we have these points in the project where we're kind of doing that. Where's the value kind of happening there? But there's like even more like, oh, I want to learn Blender. And I'm like, okay, I'm interested, but what are we going to use it for? If it doesn't fit cleanly into the project, it doesn't mean it needs to go away, but this is where it gets kind of exciting. Like, okay, is there value here? Like, is there something that we can either do a research thing and provide like a marketing tool for the firm, where we studied this thing from a marketing or from a research perspective, and now we're able to apply it to projects. So like one of my coworkers, Jason Bieber, is doing this like early design phase embodied carbon kind of dashboard thing, where he's like grabbing the models and being able to put them in Power BI and do like an early embodied carbon analysis. There's not a direct applicable fee we'd be able to associate with down projects yet, but that's something really cool that we think from a researching perspective, it's valuable to kind of investigate. So he's won like micro grants to be able to investigate that. Then there's the other side of the coin where it's like, okay, there is value here for like the client. There really is. So I was talking about dashboards. There was this tool where it's like, it's really hard, honestly, to have a team build a dashboard where they're validating their program, where they're in real time looking at their Revit model rooms and their Excel program and seeing where those deltas are in the rooms and the areas, because it inherently means you have to model at a much higher level of kind of accuracy. You're gonna have to make sure your rooms somehow tie with a relationship to that Excel data with some coding. And then you're also gonna have to like make sure you have no random rooms floating out in the model. And if you have design options, it gets even crazier. And if you have multiple rooms in multiple models, it gets even harder. So it becomes this like kind of really big task that has value. And if your team is just interested in doing that, they're gonna reap benefits from a quality standpoint on the models. But it's also this advisory service, like the thing I was kind of hinting on in the wing, where it's like, now this is a new service that we can, show to clients. And it's either say, hey, we're doing this on the project, would you like access? We normally charge for this, but we love you so much, client, please hire us again. Look at this cool tool. Or it becomes this kind of relationship builder where you're able to, keep the conversation going on long after your project's built. And now it's this new service that you're able to provide.
Do you build these separately for each project, or do you have like a template?
So some of these would be, I think the ones that we pursue at a firm-wide level we try to have some sort of kind of system to be able to do. So the dashboards, yes, extracting from model using area sync is also like a tool we have. There are like Power BI is Microsoft, right? And Speckle would be able to do something very similar. Yeah, for dashboarding itself. Another example, who's used Matterport on their projects to 3D scan? All right, that's like one of the hardest things to get money from the client because it's saving us time in terms of we don't have to go to the site all the time. We don't want to bill as we're surveying because we're not surveyors. So we go in, we 3D scan this project, and we're using it to like facilitate site visits. Well, you show your clients that, and you use it as a presentation tool. Here's your elevator lobby before, and I put this panel in, and now you can see it after. And it starts like ticking their brain up, and all of a sudden, when we finish the project, you can say, hey, do you want us to scan your finished project for you? We'll do it for this much. And then now you have marketing material for yourself, you have a whole 3D scan and all those, beautiful 360s. The client has something of value for either their facilities team or for marketing for themselves. Like we've done it for finished projects where they put it on their website to show future, prospective kind of talent that they want to hire. And it becomes this like really interesting. It's kind of like, well, this has value to me. And if the client says, hey, I want access to that, you're like, oh, they think this is valuable too. Maybe there's something here that I can, mutually help both of us.
It's interesting because when we were talking about AI earlier, I think you had made a comment like, yeah, it just keeps going and going. And it's that way that the AI always ends the thing with, and would you like me to do this for you? And it made me think like, it's only a matter of time until we start learning from the AI to start being like, yeah, the building looks great. You want me to explore 2 more stories on the building? Well, and at some point, there's gonna be a small window where the clients will be so trained like Pavlovian dogs to like respond, yeah, that sounds great, without thinking about it before they realize what they just did.
Do that, but have the ad service ready, because like we do that constantly already, where we say like, please, 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 like love my work. And here's the rendering, here's the animation,
and the more that the clients are using the AIs, the more they're gonna start subconsciously be trained to those things. That's the reality though.
Subscription models.
So even with the subscription model, it still does it.
Right.
The subscription, the non-subscription are just giving you ads.
Unlimited tokens.
I think that's where the advisory services come in though.
Yeah.
Like they're this thing where you're seen as the expert for your client whether or not they're having a built project or not. We're talking at clients at a certain scale here, but being able to have ongoing existing relationship, kind of like a subscription, because like you built this dashboard and they're like, well, we want to update it. You want to update it? Sure. You know, here's my hourly rate. You know,
Yeah, exactly, like the idea of productization of services.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling.
Well, I know we're kind of over time. Sorry, was there another one?
I just,
Yeah. Go ahead.
one more. How do you measure these new tools, back to that, like specifically external third-party tools? How do you measure the ROI on those? Like, how do you evaluate them after, okay, we're gonna implement this? How do you evaluate success?
oh man, that's
You should ask that at the beginning.
I get really nervous with all these third party proposals. And I guess objectively, you would have to look at like, what's so hard, because like, first of all, like how many people are using it? And then like, how much is it costing us? And then the question is, can we tie that third party software app to a specific line item in our contract? Like we're doing this monetarily with that tool.
Like X hours saved.
Yeah, or well, the saving is impossible, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's important we look at how we can improve efficiency across projects. But what ends up happening is that time gets filled regardless. Like I can make rendering much faster for a project team, but they're still gonna change the design the night before and spend an all-nighter on the project. And I think it's important for us to like give them the tools to not do that to themselves. But I do think the efficiency is really hard to track because that time gets filled.
I feel like there's a lot of times people making decisions what tools to keep. The more business-minded people,
Yes.
that's what they want to see. Like
Yes.
they want to see metrics, and it's like I said, it's very hard to give specific metrics like that.
I guess that's where I'm getting I think the efficiency things are like, are anybody complaining about the process is one where it's the ROA, like there was a specific thing that everybody was not happy with the tool set they were given. We introduced a new tool and now they're happy and we're not getting, so then that's really hard to kind of measure other than like no one's chatting to me about this. Like maybe like keynotes in Revit natively versus getting a keynote manager kind of software. Like there's definitely ROI there. It's just kind of hard to quantify, other than maybe people are using it. The thing that I think where digital practice is traditionally seen as this kind of IT support role, we can start being seen as business drivers, but providing these workflows that have value and get us paid with ad services or their own contracts. And that's that has a definite ROI. We're able to quantify that. Software costs this much, and we're getting paid this much to do it. Matterport was kind of hard to quantify, but now that we're getting paid, people are like, yeah, it pays for itself. And it definitely helps pay. I guess the site visits maybe for that one. You'd have to look at it specifically, but overarching point there is it's way easier to figure that out if we're getting paid directly to use that particular tool. It also gets a little scary because like, what if they change how they operate? But that's maybe our previous discussion of looking at it at a higher level than just that particular software and what am I trying to output kind of mitigates that.
Thank you. Wow. I almost didn't want to end this.
Yeah.
We did want to take just a couple of minutes at the end to talk a little bit about what people's initial thoughts are. Like this is a first kind of kickoff of the series that we had in mind, and I want to hear. I mean, everybody, including the organizers, your thoughts on like what did you guys think of format, like kind of was the discussion engaging. Like, feel free to say negative things as well. It would just it would be really helpful to know people's thoughts, I think, about whether or not to also continue these, right? Not just for engagement, in